Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm Mikhail from Halal Travel, and today we are going to cover a pretty interesting topic. I chanced upon an article written by Hulu, the editor-in-chief of Forbes Middle East, earlier this year, entitled "Are We Witnessing the Awakening of a New World Order?" The article was an overnight hit as he reviewed weaknesses and also opportunities in our post-pandemic socio-economic and political systems. I remember reading one of the points that said COVID has accelerated the shift of power from the West to the East, and the scales will be tipping in the favor of China, which is the leader in this region. And I thought to myself, if China is going to be the new world or new world power, then we will have to seriously consider its role in the development of economic and political relations with the major members of the Muslim world, especially since the biggest policy they have, the One Belt, One Road policy, cuts through many Muslim majority states such as in Central Asia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Malaysia, Indonesia, and others. Hudud is unfortunately unable to join us today, but today we have Danielle, who will be speaking on her behalf. Danielle is the Chief Financial Officer and Events Director at Forbes Middle East, where he leads the finance and events divisions, as well as the development of new digital platforms. Prior to joining Forbes Middle East, he was part of the financial services team at EY Dubai, where he led engagement for regional and international banks around compliance and process re-engineering. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Hello, Melvin. Hi, thank you so much.
Hello.
Thanks a lot for having me here. Hello, everyone.
Thank you.
I think you guys are just about to have a good afternoon, but I am quite early in the morning right now over here. It's just about 8 a.m., but it's a pleasure to be here and thank you for hosting me. Unfortunately, Khulud could not be here, but I think I'll try to do a little bit of justice. Just to go back to your point about the article that Khulud wrote, I would want to mention over here that that was one of the most famous articles of 2020 on ForbesMiddleEast.com. We had over 500,000 views of that article alone, and that was shared across the world, and we got some really good response. So I would really want people to go and have a look at that article. It's a really nice article. What I'm going to do here is I'm just quickly going to share my screen, and we'll just run through a little bit, and I'm just going to talk about how the New World Order impacts the Asian economies and then obviously the Muslim economy as well within Asia. So uh, I think there's absolutely no doubt about this, that there's been a massive stir in the global economy, and obviously Asian economies are no exclusion to that statement. And when we look at it in a comparison towards with the previous crisis, I think the most recent one would be the financial crisis of 2008 and 9, and this looks way bigger in impact than the financial crisis. Um, Interestingly, I was reading a report from International Monetary Fund where they were kind of comparing the two financial crises, and what I found out was that they expect the world economy to contract by around 4.9% this year. However, in 2009 crisis, the overall economy impact was about 0.1 to 0.2%. So if you look at it in a perspective of long run, I believe this is going to be one of by far one of the worst hit crises for the economies. But I think at the end of the day, it's all about resilience and how we all bounce back from it. When we talk specifically about Asia, there's a very interesting stats that we see. We see that the emerging and the developing Asian economies to see a contraction of obviously 0.8% 2020 again by IMF. But if you look at the 2009 crisis, you'll find out that there was the 7.6% growth during that same time. And I mean, I believe how I would like to explain this is in my understanding that when the financial crisis had hit, people obviously spending powers did go down, but then people opted for alternate production and manufacturing. And that is where the economies towards the Asian sides like Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Vietnam, Indonesia, these are the economies that started getting outsourcing from manufacturing, from the services sector. We see India has one of the highest global outsourcing rates in the world. So that's where I believe the difference is. And then this time around, the contraction is probably going to be there because most of that chunk is already with us right now. So That's probably one of the reasons for this weird kind of comparison. When you look at the economies which are very advanced, like China, India, Japan, South Korea, they will obviously witness a sharp slow as well. I believe it's because most of the economies have been hit. The overall demand for products has fallen down. Although we've seen like some of the recent e-commerce sales, like the Black Fridays and all of them, we've seen that them hit uh, massive numbers in the billions, like record hits. But I still believe that's more around people don't have a lot of stuff to do, so they end up buying stuff online. If you look at it on the South Asian economy, I think there are a few factors that really define the GDP of the South Asian region. Obviously, tourism and travel is one of the highest. Even if I talk about the Middle East, like I'm in Dubai right now. Dubai used to be a tourist hub. In December, I was in Dubai Mall last night, and like if you were in December 2019, you could not have literally a space to eat at a restaurant in Dubai Mall. And Dubai Mall is one of the largest malls. I'm not sure if it is still the largest, but one of the largest malls in the world. And it was so jam packed. But then I was there last night, and it feels so empty. So we've seen a great hit on the tourism here, and then studies show that the South Asian sites, for example, Hong Kong, Singapore, which obviously were the Asian hubs for tourism and travel, Thailand, Maldives, North Korea, they've seen a reduction of around 99.5%. So I believe tourism and travel is one of the major factors of GDP that contributes to a good GDP growth that we've seen gone down. If you look at Maldives, for example, they have two-thirds of their economy run on tourism, but then again, travel restrictions, social distancing measures, all of these things will have a massive impact on them as well. IARA says travel and tourism. We've done quite a bit of research with, and we follow quite closely at what IATA says, what they keep doing, what stats keep coming out, and the industry is running in billions of dollars of losses right now, and they don't expect that to go up anytime soon, at least in the next 2 to 3 years, because I think COVID has really impacted the way people are going to travel again. I mean, if this has not been a pandemic, I would probably be sitting in front of you on a stage right now talking about all of this rather than being on a Zoom call. But this is one of the impacts that COVID has brought on the travel industry as well. So it's really going to redefine how we move from place to the other. I think the other really important sectors within the economy of specifically the Asian sides is the manufacturing and the export sector. We saw that China had a major dip during Feb, and that's when they had their peak of the COVID. But then they've been recovering since March, and we'll get to that part how they've been doing that later on. But if we look at India, Japan, Indonesia, Vietnam, even South Korea, we've seen steep declines, and in major places, they're still below pre-COVID levels. So, which means that obviously vaccines have been announced, but I still think the overall demand in the market is so low that they are unable to get back to their even pre-COVID levels, let alone be a growth in the market. So I think it's really going to be impacting quite a lot. Local market spends, again, like I mentioned, is been has started bouncing back. We've seen a lot of activity on e-commerce. We've seen a lot of activity towards the tech side as well. But again, it's not enough for the GDPs to bounce back, because obviously I think e-commerce activity does contribute, but not as much. The other retail spends, I mean, like I was mentioning, I was in Dubai Mall last night, and I'm sure it's similar across probably Singapore and the other Asian places, countries as well. The retail outlets have slashed down their workforce by at least one third or two-third, and there are not enough people over there. Sales, they're crazy sales right now. There's like up to 50%, 60% sales going up, because the brands, the retail brands, they really want to sell. They really want their stocks to be out. They really want that cash flow coming in. But then people have lost jobs. Things have become expensive, and then purchasing power has pulled it down. So there's a lot of low demand in the external markets, which again impacts the export sector and the manufacturing sector. And I think one of the major sectors that also has been impacted is the trade sector, because right now the lockdowns and the restrictions, the international travel restrictions, have actually affected supply chains and exports. Because I know, for example, like I was in Pakistan a couple of weeks back, and I'm speaking to quite a few people who are into imports from China, for example. China being one of the largest exporters, obviously, we import a lot of things from China, and what we found out was that the average clearance time right now is taking over a month. So businesses are getting impacted, obviously, in China as well. And then the delays in those supply chains and the delay in the international transport is bringing about quite a lot of impact on the local economies that are purchasing from China. So all of these collectively, if you look at them, it's a domino effect. It starts from, let's say, one side, but then everybody else who's reliant on it. And I mean, I'm not shy to say, like, China is one of the largest exporters, and we're all kind of dependent on buying stuff from them. So if there's a delay from the top, it's just a domino effect. It continues on to the other ones as well. And smaller economies, those are the ones that get hurt at the end of the day. What's really interesting over here is to see how the new world order is shifting from the west to the east, and obviously China playing a major role in that, being one of the largest economies in the world. China has, needless to say, the initial onset, and then there was a little bit of mismanagement in the earlier stage of the COVID as well, in terms of lockdowns, in terms of actually announcing it to the World Health Organization. But I think a faltering response from United States has really hit them very hard, especially with the Trump administration and their task force. I think China has really stepped up. China, what they've done very strategically, and they're good at this. They what they've done over here is that they've helped hard-hit countries like Italy, Serbia, Iran, Pakistan. I was reading an article where Jack Ma had supported, obviously, not only the US but around 54 African countries as well. So what they've done is that they have reinforced their support to all of these countries that have been hit very hard, and then in return, there's allegiance that they expect from them, and there's a lot of activity that they expect from them. So it's an investment that's really going to help China at the end of the day. When we look at so like I mentioned, there was a dip in February in China this year, but then it started coming back. What they're really smart with is that they geared up the production and purchase of the masks, the respirators, the ventilators, and medicine, and they're now exporting it globally because they knew this is going to become a major demand in the world. And if you look at it, I've extracted a few stats over here. China is the major producer, was the major producer of surgical masks, and now it has boosted its production tenfolds. They close to half of the N95 respirators are already produced by China right now. And if you look at the antibiotics market, China produces majority of the necessary ingredients to make an antibiotic. So I mean, you can see how strategically they were placed even for something like this. And I'm not surprised to see that 95% of the US antibiotic market is already controlled by China, and obviously they cannot produce that locally. So even they are dependent on China. So I think China has really, what they've done is they've done a great job in kind of finding out the right fits and hitting it at the right time. So I think it's a big kudos to them. What other few things I believe that would really help China in the longer run? Obviously, the Belt and Road Initiative, that's not a small thing. It's a massive initiative. There's about 138 countries. And if you imagine the interconnectivity between these countries, that's almost half of the world. And that's amazing. Uh, what they're not only doing is that obviously they're helping with the infrastructure support to these countries, but also right now these countries kind of expect, and I was reading that there've been a lot of applications for debt relief from these countries that have been put in front of China, because they're unable to right now fulfill the demand locally and come up with stimulus packages for their own economies. And China is in a very good position again, because before they were only providing an infrastructural support, but now there's a cash support as well. There's an economic support, economic relief as well. So you can see the allegiance and the commitment that these countries are probably going to have with China again. Like I mentioned, States has been faltering. The Trump administration has really, I think, they've given China a great chance to come up and be on the global stage. They've had a diminishing commitment towards Europe. The European Union, the European Commission have also been kind of rethinking their alliance with the US, because the Chinese have been assisting Europeans day in, day out with their, I mean, Italy, Spain, all of these were very hard hit countries at one point in time. Those were the epicenter of COVID. We've seen so many deaths coming up in those countries. So China really stepped up their game over there. And then again, the second thing is in a downturn, what they're doing is they're investing in Europe. So they have a lot of investments in the US. Now they're doing investments in Europe, and then Middle East is no exception either to Chinese. I think another very important point, which most of you would agree with me on, is the China's tech leadership. There was a very interesting article in TechCrunch recently, which where the writer stated that China Standards 2035 is focused on setting standards in emerging industries. They have been, I mean, I was talking to major telco CIOs and CTOs a couple of weeks back actually, and we were talking about how 5G is in the region right now, how 5G is picking up in the region, what's happening, how 5G can provide not only support to the consumer like B2C, but it has great impact on the B2B side as well. And then what we found out, or what we basically were discussing, was that China is already working on 6G and 7G. So I mean, in terms of technology, they already have a leadership, but they're enforcing standards, and they're enforcing even much more commitment towards the high tech manufacturing, unmanned vehicles, additive manufacturing, new materials. I think they're really securing a very strong foothold in the targeted spheres. Beijing is coming strong in tech again. I don't think they were ever behind, but I think they will be in a leading role going forward as well. So I think there's quite a few things that China has right now in favor of it, for them to become like a global. They already are a global power, but I think obviously the shift from the western side to the east is predominantly going to be kind of led by China. When we come to Islamic or the Muslim economies, I think the first and the foremost important thing, I being a Muslim as well, is Islam really, really, really emphasizes and focuses on helping each other out in times of need. And I think this is the first thing that the Muslim majority economies or the countries need to do. And we've seen that recently at Pakistan level. Like, I mean, we're a very small country, but we're still trying our level best, and we're trying to help out wherever we can in terms of financial aid, or in terms of testing kits, or in terms of food wherever there's shortage. So I think it's really important right now that the first thing that these Muslim majority economies or countries should do is that they should exchange their expertise, public health, personnel, equipment, financial aid, whatever they can. When it comes to financial aid, it's actually a very interesting scenario. What we've seen recently, Islamic finance has really been on the rise since the onset of COVID. It has been there for quite some time now, obviously, but we've seen a lot even in the Middle East. We've seen green bonds, sukuk bonds. There's a lot. Etihad Airways just recently did one. There's a couple of smart cities, sustainable cities developers that have done these bonds. So they're raising finance. Islamic Development Bank in June raised about $1.5 billion with its first ever sustainability sukuk. And the major aim or the driving force behind that was to access essential services and SME financing and employment for employment generation, and specifically for its member countries. So I think that's a really good initiative. That's a good step that the Islamic Development Bank has taken. And obviously SME is a major part of your GDP source, and major source of your employment sector as well. So I think it's really important to focus and support them. Then we see Indonesia with the similar thing, $2.5 billion of Wakala sukuk in 3 trenches and $759 million green sukuk is dedicated towards sustainable development to support the government's coronavirus program. So I think it's again, sorry, the last one was the recent most one is the Ministry of Finance for Malaysia that launched a 500 million ringgit sukuk platform, which just about is $120 million. And the proceeds will go towards financing economies, stimulus measures, helping micro enterprises, improving broadband coverages in schools, and funding research, infectious diseases. I think that's a really good take from the Islamic economies. What I think is important to know or note over here is that Islamic finance at the end of the day has been on the rise even in the West, and not just because of COVID, before COVID as well. I've been following, being a CFO, I follow quite a lot of finance, and I've been actually looking into the Islamic finance specifically as well. So the West side, especially when it comes to Europe, has already been working on Islamic finance. So I think it's a really sustainable model. It's something that we as Muslims, or the Muslim economies, or the Muslim countries, majority countries, should really focus on. I think it's a really good way to support the community, to support its members, to support its neighbors. Islamic finance obviously is Sharia compliant, and I'm not sure if you can see this point over here, but it's around even Sharia compliant tourism, which I believe will travel, have halal, will travel is also on similar lines. So I think in the overall perspective of Muslim majority economies, it's Islamic finance is really coming up. And I think that's really going to be the way forward for us, at least for the next couple of years. And I believe actually for the next coming decades as well. So yeah, I think that's it from my side. Melvin.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for the presentation, Danielle. Personally, work as the CEO of Halal Travel, right? Because we're not just a travel site. We do, work with people ranging from, finance side, our clients like Visa International, to different banks, to different lifestyle products, from cars all the way down to simple F&B stores, right? To, of course, travel.
Yeah.
And we actually have a front row view of the whole world and how is it changing, right? And I do agree with some things you said, right? Because just now, for everyone tuning in right now, right? We had a small right? We're talking about Maldives and how Maldives has changed over the years, and China built a bridge in Maldives, right? And it wasn't there 5 years ago, and it was very American, very Singaporean, right? With the water filtration systems and so on. So China has really grown in terms of influence, right? And that has shaped a lot of Muslim countries, right? So if you don't mind, I'd like to pick your brains some questions, right? Like
Sure,
I
sure.
took some notes and it was very interesting. So the first question I have for Dania is this, right? So the Middle East has always, if I'm not wrong, 40+% of the overall GDP of Saudi Arabia itself, the kingdom, is sustained through oil, right? And we don't know that oil is something that is a bit of touchy subject because of the oil price, and a lot of countries saying that, I need to move towards renewable energy at a certain time, right? And COVID disrupting Hajj and Umrah. So there's a lot of impetus for change in the Middle East, right? So given that the shift of power from, that we observe from the west to the east, where do you see Middle East lying? Towards the west or towards the east, or actually both?
Well, I think Middle East has been, they're quite strategic when it comes to their alliances. They never really depend on either. I think it's very smartly done this. So they've got very good relations with the West as well, but they've got really good relations with the East side as well. I think more I would say there is a shift coming towards the East. We've seen the public funds, the private equities in this part of the region now focusing on investments in the East and withdrawing their investments from the West. So that's one of the changes that we've seen over here. And I believe that's probably also because of the way things have been managed out in the West. And then obviously way forward is emerging economies. and Asia is full of emerging economies. So I think
Mm.
there's no doubt about that. But yeah, in terms of funding, that's one aspect that I can speak about, because I've been following that. That is something that we've seen a lot of shift from from the west towards the east. So
Mm.
in that terms, yes. When we talk about other things, I believe Middle Eastern specific, like when you spoke about the oil and gas, obviously when you see Kuwait, you see Qatar, you see Saudi Arabia, they're hugely oil dependent countries, and
Yes.
but they have started refocusing, not
Mm.
post COVID but pre COVID as well. So like Saudi Arabia is now building a whole new city called Neom, which is a
Mm.
$500 billion project, and they're focusing on making it the new hub of Middle East, trying to take that away from Dubai. But Dubai has, as it's taken them quite a time to establish it, so it will take
Yes.
Saudi a lot of time to take it away from them. But every other country is trying to do the same. Kuwait, if you look at their vision strategy, so each of the Gulf countries has like a Vision 2030, Vision
Yes.
2035, Vision 2050. It's all about making it financial hubs and
Mm.
going towards digital transformation and moving away from a petro economy. So
Mm.
I think they do know that there's a change, and during COVID, you saw the prices fell down. Like
Yes.
it became free barrels at one point in time.
Yes.
If you had good
I think you have
huge,
to. They'll pay you
exactly,
to get a barrel.
exactly, they're paying you to
Get a
keep some
barrel.
oil. So I think, yeah, I mean, in those perspectives, they're changing from oil to other economies and shifting their focuses, because obviously they don't manufacture a lot of stuff. They are importers, they're big time importers, but they're going into what do you call hydroponic farming. They're going into self-sustaining.
Mm.
Qatar, after the Lockheed specifically, has done quite a lot. So they've kind of self-sustained themselves, and that's what others are trying to do as well, to reduce the dependency of imports.
Interesting. So actually, we you talked on you talked about a specific point just now, right? About Islamic finance, and you should tune into our show because later there's two panels on Islamic finance, right? And
Ah, that's
it's
good.
quite
Yeah,
interesting, right? Right,
yeah,
so,
yeah. I was looking at the agenda.
um, yeah, specifically in regard to that. Okay, so we have a panel later that talks about this, but I'll just share a bit, right? So there have been a lot of things coming out recently, right? And they have a lot of talk about Islamic finance because it's more sustainable, it's not non-speculative, right?
Yeah.
And it's fundamentally more sound than a lot of the standard instruments that we have, since Tulip Mania, right? Which is conventional finance, So, my question is, right, what are the shifts that do you have any notable funds that you're watching, startups that you're watching, things that are happening in this area that you'd like to share?
So like, if you can repeat your question, because I think I had some internet issues.
Okay. Oh,
I
no,
lost.
no problem, no problem. I'm just
So
talking about
I heard the part where you asked me about the startups and stuff, but I didn't get the
yes.
one.
So be it startups or Islamic finance funds, or some new innovations in this space itself, right? Do you have any opinion? Like, has the Middle East participated in some of these things in this region?
Yeah. So if you look at the investments, I mean, from one investment is towards the corporate sides, but then you see
Yes.
in the startups as well. So Middle East has actually opened up. Like I gave you an example for Pakistan from there.
Mm.
So we've recently seen a huge influx of investments into startups. We've seen that
Mm.
with India as well. One of the largest or the topmost deals in the world were startup. Yeah, was for Baiju, which is an Indian-based
Yeah.
education startup. So yeah, there's been a lot of influx of VCs into this region, and I'll give you a reason for that. The thing is, this side of the world is not. There's a reason they call us emerging economies, and the reason they call us the third world countries. Some of us, right? So we we we're getting there. When you look at the demographics, or when you look at the overall structure, you'd see like countries like India, Pakistan is number 5 in the world in terms of population. India has a billion
Yes.
people.
Indonesia as well, right?
Yeah,
There are a few
Indonesia is
people from
also.
Indonesia watching right now. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that's what I'm saying. Like, if you look, I mean, the startups like it's just skipping my name, but there's a couple of point of sale startups from Indonesia that have done really
yes.
well. You see Gojek being a big player in the Asian markets as well. So when you look at investments, you'll see that there has been a huge influx, and the reason for that majorly has been because the focus on technology has literally just started now. And if you look
Mm,
at the overall penetration when it comes to mobile and internet, we've got one of the highest in the world, and that is what was lacking previously. So people were not focusing much on this side because obviously everybody sees Silicon Valley, everybody sees that's those shining lights, and then kind of these places were a little bit off the radar. I don't say they were not investing. I think we've got some really big what do you call the startups that have come out from these regions as well. We've got
mm,
billion dollar companies. We've got unicorns. Middle East has one of the unicorns. The Middle East has is Kareem, which was taken by Uber for about $3.1 billion. Then we see Gojek, right? That's correct. That is one of the largest marketplaces as well. So I think they're improving. They're really
mm,
focusing on now. We've seen a huge influx into Middle Eastern startups as well. And the thing is, if you look at it, we're doing this part of the world, specifically when I talk about Middle East, subcontinent, and a little bit of Southeast Asia, you'll see we're working on things right now which West has done probably 5 years back. E-commerce
yes.
marketplaces, I mean, B2B marketplace is something that Jeff Bezos have been doing since 1990s, and that's what we're doing now in the region.
Yeah.
So, that's the kind of, because they already have seen all of that
Mm,
importance and the growth. So I think it's going to be, and you'll see an increase. I know for a fact I've spoken to a couple of VCs from the region already, and they're focusing on the Asian economies more than what they're focusing on the West, because that's kind
wow.
of drying up now. So there'll be a
Interesting.
lot of influx of investments in the Asian side.
Ah, interesting. Okay, so my last question, right, before
Yeah.
we end on this very exciting conversation, but we do have to end at some point, right? So my last question, right, is actually a question for one of the audience tuning in right
Yeah.
now. So it's about tourism, right? And tourism is a big thing for Have Halal Travel. And in the recent months, we've seen many activities with many, and a lot of conversation and chatter with regard to restarting the economies, starting green lane arrangements, starting travel again, and everyone's quite hopeful. And budgets are starting to be open, and people are just very excited about it. So
Yeah.
just want to ask, right? Because do you see an increase in Islamic-based? We talked about it just now, right? Islamic-based travel. Do you think there is an increasing focus on it because the West is kind of shut off right now? Because nobody can go to the West until at least everyone is vaccinated and gets everything in control, right?
Yeah.
Asia has seemed to be have taken a very pragmatic approach, to the pandemic. And when they say put on your mask and stay at home, we do actually do that, right?
Yeah. I think a lot of the Asian countries have been putting on the mask way before like we
Yeah,
even
I
knew that
agree.
concept existed in out in the market. So yeah, now I think there's definitely going to be. I think there's going to be a change in the way people travel for sure. We've already seen that. It's going to take time before travel becomes a norm again, because obviously vaccines are out now. So let's see how that pans out. Moderna, I believe I was reading yesterday, has achieved 100% success rate in the third stage of
Yes, the third
coronavirus. So,
stage. Yes.
so I think that's really a very good and a very positive news. And definitely, I think Islamic tourism, and if you look at these economies, I think they're really pushing forward for that. I think it's really going to increase again because of the fact how they are managing this pandemic better than the West. Because if I look at even from let's say, again, I'll give it a small example of, let's say, Pakistan. They had smart lockdowns because we cannot afford to lock down an entire country, because our 90% of the workforce is dependent on
Yes.
daily wages, so tourism is still open. When you come to the Middle East, you'll see, although there's a steep decline from what it was in the previous years, but there's still quite a lot of activity. I was just traveling recently and I saw there's a huge influx on the airports again as compared to when I left back for them. So I think when you come to Asia side, it's going to take a little bit of time. Maldives is picking up again. I think Singapore, Hong Kong have also opened up recently. So Islamic tourism is there definitely when it comes to Malaysia as well. I think Malaysia still has a bit of strict measures. Like when you walk
Yeah.
in, you come in, you have to like a quarantine of 14 days. So I think
But you get
that's,
well soon.
yeah. Even
You get
Thailand
well
has
soon.
Yeah. So I hope that's, I mean, because I really want to visit Malaysia and Thailand
Yes.
soon. So I hope that these restrictions get lifted off. I think the way they've managed it for sure is going to attract more people. And then again, it's when you look at the cost comparison as well, this side is tends to be more affordable than going out in the West or the
That's true.
European
That's true.
sides.
Okay, it does seem like we have a bit of time, right? So I'm trying to be a bit
Yeah.
naughty and squeeze in one more question, right?
Yeah.
So I do have a question here, right? So blah blah blah. Let me see. Okay. So there is a question about infrastructure. Okay. So our audience, Vivek, actually asked this question, right? So given the situation that Huawei and Google have stopped collaboration, not entirely, I guess, they haven't stopped entirely because that's the previous administration, right? We don't know what's going to happen next. But and also China leading the 5G network. Do you think China is able to influence the world to adopt and shift over to a new platform beyond the big people that we know, Facebook, Google, and so on, right? And also reinforcing China as a technological leader.
Well, I think it's a very subjective. I can give you my opinion on it because I think we've seen. I mean, we work with Huawei here in the region as well, and definitely this deal has given a big blow to Huawei. But Huawei is very sufficient, right? So they came up. They before even this happened, they were already in the phase of developing their own Play Store. It's
Yes,
just that they had to roll it out much sooner
quickly.
than they would have anticipated and much quicker. So that just kind of gave them a blow. But I think it has impacted Huawei. How it's going to make people use that is something still questionable because I think a lot of the American applications are still not on that platform on their Play Store. So I think at the end of the day, it really boils off. No doubt about it that China is leading 5G. However, the highest internet speed is in Saudi Arabia. Just so I let you know, it's 98
Hmm.
point some percent in the world. That's the
Oh,
highest internet speed in the world right now.
wow,
So
faster in South Korea.
yeah, it's 98 point something. There was a recent report that
Amazing.
came out. Middle East has one of the fastest internets, honestly. And
New
when I go back
cable.
home, I really miss this internet.
Mm.
It's really good over here in the region. So I think it's a very subjective. I mean, I don't really have a straight up answer for that or a really logical reasoning, but I think it's a long shot that Huawei is probably going to replace Google as a really major source of technology provider when it comes to Androids, at least. Other technologies, obviously, Huawei is leading. There's no doubts about that. When it comes to enterprise IT, I think Huawei is a leader as well. There's no match for it, and specifically in the Asian economies, that it's got a high influence. But I think with the change of powers in the White House now, there is a possibility of potentially looking at the deal again, looking at what
Reversing,
has
right? Yeah.
happened. Because at the end of the day, if you look at it, if China stops the production for US, they cannot do anything. So
That's true.
China really
That's true.
is kind of holding them, and I think it's not going to be that easy. It's just that Trump is a little bit of difficult person to handle, and I
It
think
is. It
it's
is.
like he just comes up with ideas and just he go about throwing decisions and signing executive orders. But I think
Without consequence, thinking of
yeah,
consequence.
because we've seen, like, for example, TikTok, the new kid on the block, and they just couldn't see it. So I think it's security issues, security threats and concerns are with every application. If you actually go and read the terms and conditions of the apps that you keep downloading, you'll be surprised to see what all information you're giving them away. So I don't think there's anything right now that you're doing is not being looked into or not being tapped into or not being recorded. So I don't really see how Chinese apps are a bigger security threat than the other apps that are being made, because everybody has access to your personal information, regardless of how much they tell you they don't have it. Because nope, and I can bet Melvin, tell me how many times have you read the terms and conditions before downloading
Nobody
it?
reads it, man. It's
Never.
just 4 pages, right? So agree,
Exactly.
agree.
Who's gonna read it? And even if you try reading it, it's so. I
You
mean,
won't
it's
understand.
so.
It's not made for
You,
humans.
you're not gonna understand it because there are jargons in it.
Yeah.
So I think it's let's see how it pans out. Let's see how the new administration, if he lets them take over, how do they come around with this, and how do they come out of a deadlock with China that I think is more costly. Like I mentioned as well, most of the, like, even if you look at the medical side, China is leading the way. 95% of the antibiotics is manufactured. Those ingredients are coming from China. So I think it's just like irrational decision making at certain levels in the past couple of years, which hopefully is going to get better, I guess.
Yes, inshallah, right?
Inshallah,
Inshallah.
inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah. All right, that's all we have for today. Thank you, Daniel, for sharing your insights. I'd like to just give a summary, right? You know, Islam is, you think about it, Islam is really, spread across the region because of the Silk Roads. And it's one of the biggest and, most connected routes in the whole world, right? And it was only made possible thousands of years ago because some people decided to travel down and on the sea and by land. If you think about it, we are actually revitalizing that Silk Route, right? And it's enabling trade, ideas, scientific advancements, and so on to happen, right? And now we are at the cusp of a turning point, right? Where COVID has accelerated a lot of shift of power from the west to the east, and therefore we are in this position right now where we're debating on this and talking about this subject. So, so thank you, Daniel, for sharing your insights today. I really learned a lot from you. So I just wanted to give some announcements, right? So we are facing some technical difficulties on the platform itself. If you're tuning in right now, if you want access to the rest of the live sessions, please check your email because the email has all the live Zoom links in case you cannot access the platform. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that, we've talked about Islamic finance just now during our talk. And there are two live sessions later on at 2:50 p.m. Singapore time, GMT +8, and the other one will be 15:45, which is 3:45 GMT +8. They will be covering different aspects of the Islamic finance sector. One on a broad-based view with Wahed Invest. I think one of the only, if I'm not wrong, Nasdaq listed products, Islamic finance products. That's the first session, and after that, we're going to have a very interesting talk between a conventional VC, which is Vibranium, my friend T Singh, and an Islamic startup, which is Fateh, and also a guy in Islamic finance, right, Raj. So you have a very interesting conversation, right? Where it looks through the spectrum from conventional finance to Islamic finance. So that's all we have for today. Thank you again, Daniel, and also for everyone who's tuned in to this talk. Hope to see you again. All right.
Thanks
You
a
can
lot,
click on the
Melvin. Thank you for having me.
next video. Yeah, thank you. Click on the next
Thank you.
video to go to the next session. All right. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you.
Thanks, Melvin. Take care. Bye.
Okay. Bye bye.